Inez, I looked at my calendar. I don't think I can do August 5th. I can probably do another day, but
James just texted me, he's on his way.
Okay, got it.
He left a little late.
Understood.
but I'm definitely scheduled up for all of the Ix events. So if you do have a presence down there, I can bring to all of those. You might come down to the farmer's market one time.
I just sent Susan a thing about the night out thing at Ix on August 1st. We should probably show up for that.
Thank you for this, by the way.
I'll be there for sure. I put it on my calendar.
Oh, IT, inside of, did you go to the annex to pick up yours?
God, thank you so much. Oh my God, this made my, yes. Fourth floor.
It's part. So we are right beside Jaybird.
This is like Tyler Henderson. This thing is a dream compared to what I have.
Yeah, right across from that
Hampton
Hampton
Inn.
Inn. Yeah.
Because I remember,
The parking sucks.
what part?
Now that I know, yeah, that's what I've been sending everything to now.
And the shirts.
You can come get that.
What part?
Yeah.
Can I get one too? So you have, are you back in there in
Different
one of those
colors, all
suites,
kinds of
'cause
different
it's like,
colors.
it's all this maze back in there by Jaybird.
It is. So we have,
There
there's
he is.
Jaybird,
He's going.
and then there's the door next that has those suites.
What's up?
And then, hey James, and then right beside those suites is our office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get out of your way here, James. How are you, brother?
Oh, pretty good. Been a while.
Yeah, seems like it.
You got your nice crisp shirt right
I
there.
know, we
I was
gotta get
telling
some shirts.
go by the office and Inez will hook you up.
And they have them in there, okay. Oh, yeah.
Inez, we're coming
Well,
for
I
our
had to get mine
shirts.
on the way out. Next passes out, you
Yeah,
printed
she
one out
did.
yourself.
Yeah, she's got them, James.
That's what I love. I just left some food at home, so.
Yep, go to it.
I don't know, Mr. Fleming, did you see? You walk right by the food, Mr. Fleming?
Pardon?
You walk right by the food?
Yeah,
Have food and drink?
yeah,
You taking
I
care
forgot
of
all
us.
about it, I ate this whole thing down. All right, here we go. Got it. Let's see, who are we waiting on? Oh, Miss Tricia's gonna,
Yeah, she's online.
It's here.
Do you have a printed copy of the?
We have everyone, right?
Never thought.
hey Patricia.
Hi.
Yeah?
Pat?
Well, I'm not gonna.
Hi.
It's all good.
I do not believe so.
Yeah, we probably should have that, shouldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a business card.
Yeah, yeah.
Anybody else need a copy of the agenda? I'll take, we were just talking about that.
How you doing?
I went to Maryball.
Chris, I forgot my fork.
The important
They
thing.
slowing everything down a little, didn't it?
I don't think we ever start on time, so you're fine.
I was in Stan yesterday.
Really?
She made mine there.
Stalking,
Of course, you always write that.
Yeah.
stalking girls on Keisha's old campus.
It was all girls when I went there.
Yeah, we were there yesterday. My brother just lives up behind there, you know, that hill behind Maryball, between Maryball and Stewart Hall.
Okay.
Up that hill. So, his daughter was in town with her fiance, so we went over to meet him.
We used to joke and say NBC stands for Mighty Big Cash, because going up and down the hills, you're gonna get some nice tone.
It's a hilly city, I'm telling you.
see you earlier today.
Where?
The meeting with Emily.
Oh, no, so we went to the jail board meeting in Westcott.
Gotcha.
I gotta try not to eat too much, so. My wife just finished making very Did you get it? I grabbed a piece of chicken and I out the door.
Yeah, so just have us in
Were you here last night, but she had Panera here last night?
Yeah, I was here.
Taking care of
Okay, folks, can we get started here? It's about time. And,
it. You were asking for help.
we have a nice turnout. So, call the meeting to order here. Does anyone have any announcements or shout outs they'd like to share with the group? Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming. You notice that thanks to Inez, we now are having food. Yes, before each meeting. So if you have any comments on the food, or something you want, or don't want, you can let her know. She's very flexible. And who knows, if you want to bring a favorite dish or something, and we could sort of gradually turn it into a potluck, that would be good as well. Been more cost effective. And I guess that's all I have at this point. So you all have a copy of the agenda, and as you can see, we've got a guest speaker, very distinguished guest speaker, and two sets of public comments, the Inez Executive Director's report, and a couple of reports about hearing examiners where we made some interesting progress, and a potential new recommendation that the board is considering related to dash cam usage and effectiveness. And finally, we're going to talk about public engagement and public outreach opportunities. Does anyone have any comments or amendments for the agenda? Someone move to approve?
So move.
I'll second it.
Okay, so let's see, Vice Chair Frazier,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Lakeisha,
Yes.
Mr. Dillard,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yeah.
Reverend Jones Turner.
Yes.
Okay, so it's passed.
It's Susan.
Oh,
Me?
Susan. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Susan Krischel, yes, okay, so it does pass unanimously, despite my best efforts. Also, we have, I sent around a copy of the minutes, or excuse me, Inez sent around a copy of the minutes that she pulled together. Does anyone have any comments or suggested amendments on the minutes? Okay, move to approve,
Approve as written?
second?
Second.
Okay, Jeff,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Lakeisha,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming, Susan Krischel.
I wasn't here, so I'm going to abstain.
Okay, Reverend Patrick Jones Turner, Patricia
Yes.
Jones Turner, yes, okay, we're good with one abstention. Okay, so it's my distinct honor now to present a guest speaker who I know quite well for obvious reasons. Anna Mendez is the executive director of the Haven. Before that, she was the CEO of Partners for Mental Health. She's lived in Charlottesville for about 6 years, and she's the reason why I moved here. She's going to speak to us about homelessness in Charlottesville and the interaction with policing. Anna?
Almost everything he said was true, but we know that the real reason that he moved here was to follow his granddaughter, not me. Can we pull up my slide deck, please? Again, my name is Anna Mendez. I am the executive director of the Haven. I am honored to be here with you this evening. I am going to talk, been asked to touch on kind of three kind of distinct buckets. Recent local data regarding homelessness, the Haven, who we are, what we do, what's our role in addressing homelessness in Charlottesville, as well as kind of our observations around the intersection of homelessness and policing. And I have been told that I have about 20 minutes for my presentation, followed by about 10 minutes for questions. So I am going to start my timer to keep me honest. So with that, we are just going to jump right into data, which is a love of mine, which I likely come by honestly. So next slide, please. The third Monday in every January since 2010, the community of Charlottesville has come together to conduct what is called a point-in-time count. And this is our best effort to create an accurate census of every single person in our community who is experiencing homelessness that night. A person is considered to be homeless if they are living outside, if they are living in a structure unfit for human habitation, or if they are living in a shelter. The orange line across the top is the number of people who on the third Monday of January were sleeping in an emergency shelter. The blue line that starts out in the middle is the number of people that night who were sleeping in transitional housing. And the dark brown line that starts at the bottom is the number of people who were unsheltered and actually sleeping outside the third Monday in January. And the third Monday in January is chosen because it is generally the coldest time of the year. So that means that theoretically the fewest number of people possible are unsheltered. I think there's a lot of interest. This data, I think, shows a lot of interesting things. But to me, what I would like to point out to everyone is how between about 2012 and 2022, the number of unsheltered community members remained remarkably constant, particularly when you consider how big the population of the Charlottesville area has grown during that time. But you do see between 2022 and 2023 a statistically significant increase in the number of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. Next slide, please. So the previous slide was pit count data broken down to show where are people who are experiencing homeless, like where are they sleeping the night of the pit count. This is also pit count data, but this is drilled down to look specifically at the number of people experiencing homelessness the third Monday of January who meet the definition of being chronically homeless. And someone in our community is considered to be chronically homeless if they have been homeless for 12 consecutive months, so for an entire calendar year, or if they have had at least 3 discrete episodes of homelessness that combined make a total of at least 365 days. What I think is most striking about this slide is the really significant decline that we see between 2012 and 2014. And for those of you who were here in Charlottesville during that time, you may remember that that is the span of time in which our project-based permanent supportive housing program, The Crossings, which is on Preston Avenue, kind of across catty corner from Bodo's, came online. And permanent supportive housing is a very strong evidence-based intervention which requires as a criteria for eligibility that a person be chronically homeless. So I think it's just an interesting reflection that our local data kind of echoes the effectiveness of permanent supportive housing. Next slide, please. So our pit count data is important, but again, that is really just showing us what is happening one very cold night out of the year. And that does not necessarily give us a great reflection of what is happening on an annual basis. That is why the Charlottesville community maintains something called the by name list. That is exactly what it sounds like. It is a list of everyone experiencing homelessness by name. And in order to be entered onto the by name list, a person must interact with a service provider, either a public or private service provider, who themselves participates in and has access to the shared online database that holds the by name list. And then that person must disclose to the service provider that they are, in fact, experiencing homelessness. I tell you all of those things so that you will reach the conclusion yourself, oh, this is likely an underrepresentation of the number of people who are experiencing homelessness. And while that is absolutely true, it is the most accurate reflection that we have as a community. And so, unfortunately, what the data shows is that probably, realistically, probably close to 500 people every year experience homelessness in the Charlottesville area, and on any given day, an average of 200 people are experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please. So what's holding us back? That's some pretty sobering data, and to think about, we are seeing a statistically significant increase in unsheltered homelessness, that 500 human beings are homeless in our community in a given year, and that on any given day, about 200 people are. Housing is the solution to homelessness because homelessness is a housing problem. Next slide, please. And the impact of lack of housing is probably one of the strongest pieces of data that we have to illustrate this, is that from April 2022 to April of 2023, it took on average a person 206 days from the time they entered an emergency shelter situation in Charlottesville until they were able to exit into stable housing. Next slide, please. Prior to the pandemic, that was 48 days. So we've gone from 48 days to over 200. That is all of that data. I just did a really quick data dump, and that is really and truly just kind of scratching the surface about what we know about homelessness in Charlottesville. And I have a lot more data I would love to share with you. But because of time constraints, I'm now going to kind of move into talking about what is the Haven's role in addressing homelessness in Charlottesville. Next slide, please. I'm going to start with a little bit of a history lesson about the Haven. In 2005, 2006, a diverse community group came together and voiced a desire for a shelter downtown, close to where people experiencing homelessness were already hanging out. The following year, in 2007, Hollywood producer and UVA alum Tom Shadyac.
Sorry.
Well, maybe just turn it off. You can always just shut it. You can't leave there.
All right, good. All right, the following year in 2007, Hollywood producer and UVA alum Tom Shadyac was in town filming Evan Almighty, and he purchased what is now the Haven property at 112 West Market Street, and he gifted its use to the community group. Producer Shadyac and the community group's vision was to open a low-barrier, full-service, year-round overnight shelter. NIMBYism in the city restricted use of our 20,000 square foot, 4-story building to providing day shelter services only, and only in our basement, and only from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily. After 2 years of extensive renovations paid for by Shadiac, the Havens Day Shelter opened to the public in 2009 under the restrictions of the special use permit imposed by the city. Next slide, please. So we opened our day shelter in 2009, and since then we have been open 365 days a year. In 2022, more than 440 unique human beings visited us over 19,000 times. That's an average of more than 50 people per day. We provided over 17,000 meals, 3,000 showers, did 2,500 loads of laundry, and that year we also served as the legal address of record for over 500 community members experiencing homelessness or housing instability. That means that our team sorted and distributed over 1,000 pounds of mail. We also act as the storage facility for all of the worldly possessions of more than 80 human beings in our community experiencing homelessness every year. In 2022, we accomplished all of this with the help of over 5,600 volunteer hours. In 2023, our first quarter data indicates that it will be our busiest year ever. We are projecting that more than 500 people will visit the Haven over 20,000 times, and we will provide over 20,000 meals. I think for the sake of time, we should probably skip to the next slide, please. So the Haven started as a day shelter, and that is still probably our most well-known and most public-facing program. However, we are also strongly committed to working towards ending homelessness in Charlottesville. Just a reminder, people are homeless when they sleep outside, in structures not fit for human habitation, and in shelters. So what that means is people who are sheltered are still people who are homeless. Sheltering people is a crucial aspect of harm reduction, but sheltering people does not reduce homelessness. Recognizing this, about 10 years ago, we launched our housing department. And every year since then, our housing department has helped over 200 community members either exit or avoid homelessness. There are multiple different programs within our housing department, and they each have their own eligibility and exclusionary criteria. But the one thing that they have in common is that they are all based on the principles. We carry them all out in fidelity with the Housing First model. The first and most foundational principle of the Housing First model is access to housing with no readiness requirements. The data is really clear that housing is essential to things like being able to maintain employment, maintain sobriety, have an income. And so requiring people to meet those readiness markers first ends up, in fact, being ineffective. So now that I've given you a crash course in kind of the data around homelessness in Charlottesville and what some of the roles that the Haven plays in addressing homelessness in Charlottesville, I want to take just 1 second to provide you some of our observations about the intersection of homelessness and policing in Charlottesville. Next slide, please. At the Haven, as we have observed increasing public opposition to the presence of unhoused community members in public spaces, we have been grateful that, on the whole, we have not observed a measurable increase in CPD's ticketing or arrest of people experiencing homelessness. Data analysis conducted by UVA's System Engineering Department under the guidance of Charlottesville's criminal justice planner, the recently retired Neil Goodlow, indicated that people on the by name list are actually in custody at ACRJ less frequently than would otherwise be predicted on the basis of population size alone. This is a trend that we want to see maintained, and we would like to bring to the attention of the PCOB the 2018 Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling in Martin v. Boise. In that ruling, Judge Berzon, writing for the majority, stated that we consider whether the Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment bars a city from prosecuting people criminally for sleeping outside on public property when those people have no home or other shelter to go to. We conclude that it does. Judge Berzon further went on to explain that the state may not criminalize conduct that is an unavoidable consequence of being homeless, namely sitting, lying, or sleeping on the streets when there are more homeless persons than available shelter beds or in the absence of other adequate alternatives. Alternatives must be practically accessible to the given individual, taking into account disability, religious beliefs, or other restrictions. In 2019, the Supreme Court of the United States declined to hear Idaho's appeal of this ruling. Depending on the time of year, on any given day in Charlottesville, the number of people experiencing homelessness exceeds available shelter by 30 to 70 beds. As the Haven anticipates public pressure to criminalize homelessness to continue to increase, we urge the PCOB to keep the Martin v. Boise ruling front of mind. The Haven encourages you to take seriously your responsibility to oversee CPD policies and procedures broadly, in addition to reviewing specific incidents of alleged misconduct. That concludes my prepared remarks, and I am very excited to take your questions.
Are there limits to acceptance if there's mental illness or substance abuse issues, or anyone can come to the Haven?
There are only 5 people in the known universe that are permanently barred from coming to the Haven, and that is after repeated threats or incidents of violence and an unwillingness, consistently demonstrated unwillingness to modify behavior. So almost everyone is welcome at the Haven.
Do you all track numbers of Charlottesville City elementary, middle school, high school kids that are experiencing homelessness?
The Haven does not. We are a member of a coalition of service providers called the Continuum of Care. BRAC, the Blue Ridge Area Coalition for the Homeless, is kind of the lead agency of that coalition, and they do some data tracking regarding number of families with children that are experiencing homelessness. I am not sure if that gets subdivided based on like preschool age, elementary school age, or if it's just like any child under 18.
And did you say it was a city ordinance that prevents the overnight stays?
It is our special use permit. Yes.
Your special use permit.
The city, gratefully, the city has very recently indicated a willingness to review that. And we're grateful for that. And the reality of the situation is, well, first of all, I would just like to invite everyone who can hear my voice, please come visit us at the Haven. I would love to give you a tour. And when you come visit us, you will also see that we are clearly not designed to be an overnight shelter. Producer Shadiak was willing to cover back in 2007, was willing to cover the full cost of us being an overnight shelter. his financial situation is no longer such that that's something he is able to do. So the Haven is currently, with this new news from the city that they're willing to revisit that, the Haven is working to engage a consultant for us to get an understanding of what would the true cost be for us to undergo all of the both like capital work and operational changes to become an overnight shelter.
Would seem that Martin versus Boise is an incredibly wide-ranging decision, and it would basically, it's an order to all cities all over the country to either seriously modify their policing or spend a lot more money on housing. Has that had any effect here? You know, what are the trends in the last couple of years?
We are incredibly grateful. As I said earlier, we're incredibly grateful that we have not observed a marked increase in number of like ticketing or arrest. Contrary to that, we've also not seen like a significant decrease either. I will also tell you that a few months ago, many of our guests started reporting to us that CPD officers were telling them that they were going to start enforcing the curfew in Market Street Park so that guests could no longer be there overnight. And enough guests heard this enough times that they actually started sleeping elsewhere. And I think perhaps an interesting law student paper topic would be, what is the intersection between curfew laws, right, and Martin v. Boise? I will say that to the extent, from my bare bones research, that to the extent curfews are enforceable, they must be equally enforced. And after our guests were run out of the park, I started showing up at 3 a.m. every morning walking my dog, and I was never asked to leave, regardless that I smiled and waved at all of the police officers as they drove by.
Ms. Mendez, would you characterize the relationship between the Haven and Pacham?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So Pacham is the Haven operates year-round as a day shelter and a housing provider. We don't own housing ourselves, but we provide like rental subsidies so that people can access housing themselves. Pacham is a seasonal overnight shelter that operates in the cold weather months. And rather than having a fixed address, as the Haven has a fixed address, Pacham actually stands for People and Congregations Engaged in Ministry. And so it moves from like different faith congregation to different faith congregation every 1 to 2 weeks. So quite a few of our regular, like our year-round regular guests are able to use Pacham services when Pacham is open in the winter time. Prior to COVID, the Pacham intake every evening actually happened at the Haven, and then transportation was provided to the various churches, and then kind of like COVID health restrictions caused kind of a reconsideration of policies and procedures. But that's, we are separate nonprofit organizations that often serve many of the same community members. Yeah.
Thank you.
Question for you.
Yes.
Do you all have any in-account, right, with Piedmont Housing with this?
Absolutely. I would actually say that many, I don't want to say the majority, but close to the, I would say 40-ish, our housing director is listening, maybe she'll text me. Hint, Ange, hint, phone a friend. Many of the people that our housing department are able to help obtain housing end up moving into PHA owned and operated properties. Yeah.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about the same thing with the cost of housing in Charlottesville obviously increasing. You know, what are the options? As I'm asking that, I was talking to somebody over in Stanton yesterday about Habitat for Humanity, and even there, even though we think of Stanton maybe as being more affordable, even Habitat is having a tough time acquiring land and building houses, and so, you know, what are the options? I mean, the Piedmont housing,
Piedmont housing is one. Permanent supportive housing, like the Crossings, is another. While permanent supportive housing is a very strong evidence-based program, it requires that you must first be chronically homeless before you can access it, which means that you have to have been homeless you have to have been sleeping outside for a year, right? So we very much, the Haven very much wants to move Charlottesville to a place where we don't need permanent supportive housing because we're not allowing people to be homeless for that long. But permanent supportive housing is an option. Private landlords are an option. But those options are becoming further and further between, which is why in some of the data that I saw, like, we've gone from generally being able to help people exit emergency shelter in less than 50 days to more than 200 days. So it is really and truly becoming a challenge.
Do you offer breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
We offer breakfast every day of the year. We offer lunch on Fridays and Sundays, and we do not offer dinner. The Fridays and Sunday, there is a rotating soup kitchen in downtown Charlottesville for soup kitchen lunch, and that's kind of how we ended up with Fridays and Sundays.
Where's the rotating soup kitchen?
I will
It's on
get
the
the
downtown
location.
mall.
Yes,
On the downtown
various churches,
Churches.
in downtown Charlottesville, I think including the Presbyterian Church on Park Street, which isn't right downtown.
And do you have a list of where those are?
I do, yes, and I will email it to the entire PCOB. If I try to do it off the top of my head, I'm sure I will get it wrong, and I will hear about it. So I will email it to you.
Another question for you. I'm just very curious about this thing with Piedmont housing. The people that you all deal with, come in contact with daily. How many people that Piedmont housing actually can help that put in housing?
That's the information that I could get you is how many people that our housing department supports we are able to help move into a PHA property. PHA would have to be the entity to tell you how many of their total units are occupied by connections made from the Haven. So I will get you our portion of that data.
So with your partnerships with organizations like PHA, do they overlook if there's a criminal record, like a registered sex offender?
No.
Okay.
Which is why. So we can help at the Haven. My team knows that I like to say, all it takes is money. And that's almost always true, except when you have certain barriers on your background, right? So when you have a criminal conviction, particularly if it's a felony, but not just a felony, particularly if it's within the last 5 years, and if you've had an eviction, right? We could be in a position to guarantee your rent to a landlord for the entire 12-month period of a lease, or you could have that income yourself, right? But then you're still not able, right, to get that lease. So that's kind of no one tells you. I mean, we like to talk a lot about kind of the private market will take care of housing, right? But no one tells me that if I have a criminal record, I can't go buy an iPhone if I can afford it, right? But even if I can afford an apartment, if I have a criminal record, I'm still not going to be able to get the lease. And that is why one of the novel and creative solutions that the Haven is currently exploring is what's called a master leasing program. And what that is we would not become the property owner, but we would rent properties from landlords. So we would hold the lease. And in exchange for holding that terms of that lease would say that we are fully responsible for anything that should happen to that unit. We are also fully responsible for making sure that your rent gets paid, with the condition that we can sublet to anyone that we want to. We do not currently have the funds or the capacity to pull that off, but that is something that we are hoping to launch soon.
Okay.
I would like to offer my condolences to the loss of your shelter manager. And I also want to ask a question pertaining to if individuals are ill and homeless with a non-contagious disease, is there a means to get them the health care that they need? And then if they have a contagious disease, such as COVID and things of that nature, what could be done to assist them?
Thank you very much for your condolences. Most people probably know our 3 weeks ago, our day shelter manager was murdered in her home, and we are doing our best to move forward. It feels incomprehensibly hard, and I also know that moving forward is how we best honor Laura's memory and her spirit. We do at the Haven. We don't. We're really fortunate in that DSS comes to the Haven on a regular basis to help people with Medicaid applications, Medicaid recertifications. Every week at the Haven, we host two medical clinics. UVA comes and offers a primary care clinic physically at the Haven, and then UVA Psychiatry comes and offers a psychiatry clinic every week at the Haven. So that is really the health department also comes and does things like HIV and Hep C testing. UVA also does things like COVID testing and COVID vaccinations. That's really the extent of our ability to provide healthcare to people on site. We are really grateful for a partnership with the city and with UVA that holds a very small number of hotel rooms that people experiencing homelessness can access if they are like positive for COVID, or if they are so sick that it is likely that sleeping outside could result, like they've been discharged from the hospital, but would likely be readmitted under very poor circumstances were they to sleep outside. But these are very like minimal numbers of rooms that people are only able to access for very short periods of time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I remember Chief Coaches, and I don't remember if it was before this board or some other board that I'm on, was saying that part of the reason that the police keep being drawn into dealing with emotionally or mentally disturbed people is because there's not enough mental health facility beds in this town to deal with this, and there's not enough workers who could respond in lieu of the police. Can you confirm that that's true?
I can confirm that while Virginia is the 10th wealthiest state in the Commonwealth, we are 30th in per capita public mental health care spending. And what this means is that our community services are just incredibly underfunded for what we need them to be able to do. Despite the fact that we are 30th in public mental health care spending, Virginia actually has the third highest number of inpatient psychiatric beds on a per capita basis in the nation. What that means is that more than 75 cents of every public mental health care dollar in Virginia goes to providing inpatient care, and only 25 cents of every dollar goes to community-based care. The existence of hospital beds does not prevent the need for hospital beds, and that is why we are in such a pickle. What we really need to do is fund our public mental health care system to the level worthy of a state as well resourced as Virginia, so that people can access care in the community before it rises to the level of being able to need hospitalization.
Well, thank you, Anna.
One last question, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
I wanted clarification. You mentioned something about direction that the CPD officers were giving to the homeless people. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
What we were hearing was that from multiple guests was that they were being told that CPD was going to begin enforcing the curfew in Market Street Park. There is a curfew in Market Street Park. There are signs that say that there's a curfew in Market Street Park. And enough of our guests heard it from enough officers that they stopped sleeping there. This was a few months ago. And since then, what happened was there was kind of a big hubbub about it. I started walking my dog at 3 a.m. every morning and then told CPD, hey, this doesn't feel good to me. And then things calmed down enough that recently I believe people have started sleeping in the park again. And we have not heard that they have been told that the curfew is going to be enforced again.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you.
Appreciate it.
You're in for a job. Good job.
All right. At this point, it's time for our first public comment period. And the standard procedure here is to ask for comments from individuals in the audience here first. Would anyone like to make a comment, ask a question? Carol?
I'm not going to belabor anything, but I want to say thank you to Arnaz for re-engaging the community and seeing how we can work together at the BCOB to make sure that black and brown folks are not getting beat or disturbed by police. So thank you so much.
Sure. Is there anyone online, Mr. Trail?
We have one attendee. His hand is not raised at the moment. Sir, if you'd like to speak, now is the time. If you click the raise hand icon.
Is there anyone else present here who would like to make a comment, ask a question? Okay, I guess we're done. There will be another comment period at the end of this meeting. So if questions arise, you'll have another opportunity. So the next item on the agenda is the Executive Director's Report. Ines Gonzalez.
Good evening, distinguished members of the board. I'm going to keep this brief. I'd also like to thank the community for yet again showing your support and attending today's meeting, as well as Anna Mendez for accepting my invitation, and I'd like to thank the chair for facilitating that request on my behalf. So the good news is the year-to-date complaints from the CPD have not increased since our last meeting. There have been no complaints filed in June of this year. As far as the PCOB complaints, we had a total of 6 complaints filed since the inception of our complaint portal. Of those, 3 of them were from last year, 3 of them from this year. 3 of those investigations were handled by the CPD because we didn't actually have a executive director. The remaining 3 were handled by me. Of those 3, all 3 of those have been closed out, so we have nothing pending as far as the complaint portal for the PCOB.
What is closed out?
Closed meaning, I did an investigation, I was able to sustain some, not sustain others. One of the complaints actually was a complaint not concerning the CPD, but a crosswalk-related complaint that was actually forwarded to the traffic engineering department. And they're going to be eliminating the crosswalk as it was never meant to be a permanent crosswalk to begin with. The remaining 2 complaints, one of them was handled by the CPD. However, the individual complainant reached out to me and asked me to look at it. I requested and received from the CPD a copy of the body cam footage, which revealed that the complainant's story did not marry up to what was on the body cam footage. It was completely in opposition to what was actually there. So that investigation was unfounded. The other complaint, which I spoke to the chair about, it did not involve, after reviewing the body camera footage, it did not involve any violation of state law, nor did it violate any department policy. The issue was, understandably, that the complainant was unsettled by the fact that he had, and I should say this, because of prior experiences, he explained to me that he had dash cams of his own in his private vehicle, in the front and in the back. And what he captured was, he was driving down the street after leaving his girlfriend's apartment. An officer was driving in the opposite direction, saw him, turned around, and followed him for at least 2 or 3 minutes, eventually pulling into a location which I will not mention, but never once pulling him over. So quite naturally, the individual felt unsettled by that, justifiably so. However, there were no violations of department policy or law. But it brought into a conversation that the chair and I had regarding exploring how the CPD uses their dash cam footage. So there's that. And again, that was closed out with a letter to the complainant, letting him know that we were going to explore other avenues concerning that issue. We have 1 pending review request. On that front, I actually sent a letter to the attorney representing the complainant. That was done Tuesday of this week, and I have yet to receive a response. But again, I will follow up with a phone call if I don't hear anything by the end of the week to find out what the status of the complainant's decision is one way or the other. Other than that.
And what's the nature of the letter?
Well, basically, what it is I'm looking for is, as per the operating procedure, we require written approval on the part of the complainant for us to retrieve the investigations and any evidence associated to that complaint, whether it be body cam footage, any reports that were submitted, things like that. So in order for me to actually look at that and actually start pulling those investigations, we're going to need her written permission saying that she's going to allow us to take a look at that. And the very last thing was simply community outreach. Mr. Watson had requested, I think, about 2 meetings ago that we obtain swag for upcoming events. We have done that. We have an abundance of swag. Which, yes, by the way, I distributed to the wonderful members of the community that showed up today. But yes, we have, for example, West Haven Day coming up that I've been aware of that I actually registered us for. And I spoke to Chief Kochis today regarding National Night Out. National Night Out, I understand, is August 1st, and West Haven Day is going to be August 5th. Anybody wishing to volunteer to help me distribute said swag, it would be greatly appreciated.
Yep. Well, thank you.
Another one is Solar Seaville too in August.
I have Solar Seaville. I don't think I have the date yet.
It's the 11th through the 13th of August.
Oh, is it? So the Human Rights Commission was very gracious enough to meet with me and provide me with a list of dates and events that are coming up. But if you all know of anything, like for example, the Vice Chair sent me something today about National Night Out, and that's why I wound up calling Chief Kochis about it. I'm sorry?
Yeah, it just makes it easy.
I haven't got a date for that yet. If you have it, please. Great, so whatever you all have, could you please forward it to my email? If anybody needs my contact information, please let me know before you leave. I'll distribute my business cards.
Pride Festival will be September 17th, I believe, but I think it's still questionable where exactly it's
I
gonna
did
be.
forward a document to the chair regarding upcoming events with the dates that I was provided by the HRC, so I was grateful to them for that. But yeah, it's going to require a little bit of assistance because you're talking about we have tents, tables, and they're not going to get themselves there just by me, so whatever help that you all are willing to give, I will sincerely appreciate. Do we have any questions? No? Thank you very much.
And we actually have an item later about outreach, so we can talk.
Very good.
Talk a little bit more. So the next issue that I would like to address is it's related to our outstanding review request, that has been outstanding for a year. And one of the major steps or hurdles in moving forward on that is identifying, recruiting, and training hearing examiners to deal with hearings if we decide to hold them. So this last week, we sent around basically a recruiting letter to the Charlottesville Albemarle Bar Association, and they distributed it to their members. And we got a couple of answers just in a couple of days of retired attorneys who are interested in hearing more about being hearing examiners, which I think is very helpful. And Ms. Krischel is dealing with the Supreme Court, basically.
I basically sent them a copy of the draft desk book because we're still waiting for the city attorney, correct me, Pam, but we're waiting for the city attorney to approve it?
I don't know if it's been submitted, Mr. Mendez. I hadn't been tasked with submitting it to the city attorney. I can tell you that our firm was serving as interim city attorney because I did not wish to be on both sides of that. We were waiting for the new city attorney to be seated. And I know he is sort of drinking from the fire hose right about now with the amount of work he has. So I certainly am happy to make a call to him to get some priority for review and approval. I'm happy to do that on behalf of the board. If you would like to task me with that, I'm happy to give Mr. Stroman, your new city attorney, that call to see if he could give some priority to his approval or tasking that with one of his deputies or assistants.
I think that would be very useful. I put in a message to Mr. Stroman asking for some time on his calendar, but like you say, he's, I'm sure, still settling in, and so it's been very hard for him to make time at this point.
Well,
At any rate, we did send, I'm sorry.
I can tell you I had met with Mr. Stroman just in transitioning our firm out of the interim city attorney position to him. I did give him great details about what the PCOB is and sort of the priority that it has in the city and with the police chief. And he is very interested in engaging with he did express interest in engaging with PCOB. So I will certainly make a call to him tomorrow just to kind of see if we can move this up on his large list of things that he needs to consider. I'm sure it's something he could task to one of the assistants because it's not a heavy lift since it's already been put in a good format, and it really just kind of follows the operating procedures which were already given the blessing of the city attorney, Ms. Robertson, before she left.
So anyway, I've sent that draft desk book and the approved operating procedures to the Executive Secretary of the Supreme Court, and I think that's sufficient to at least get the ball started. He's aware that it's a draft.
Yeah, basically, the Secretary has a list of certified hearing officers, and hopefully there will be some in this area who are interested and qualified in taking on that role. Also should point out that Ms. O'Barry is kind of running interference for us on the legal and ethical front because hearing examiners for a PCOB are a new thing in Virginia. And so we want to make sure that we touch all the bases and make sure there's not even any appearance of conflict when any of the recruits take on the job. So.
I might also add that the executive secretary did say that they need to review our operating procedures and compare it to the rules that they have for their hearing examiners to see whether they match. But he seemed to indicate that even if they don't match, they are still willing to do a blast out to all of their members to see if any retired attorney or retired judge is interested in contacting us directly.
That's good. Yeah, because they don't, this is a new animal because it's not an administrative law judge. So they will find many more differences than similarities. But again, I'm hopeful that they will just find wise and qualified people who are willing to be involved with the PCOB. So, any more questions on that? Okay. One of the issues that came up during the executive director's report was dash cam usage, the patterns of dash cam usage and the effectiveness of dash cams in assuring fair and just policing. And so, when we developed our recommendation about bias-based policing, that was kind of a slam dunk. It was clear that the bias-based policing wording was poor and unnecessarily and unfairly narrow. What I'd like to suggest for us now is that we move on to something a little bit more complex, to sort of join forces with the police in thinking about options for expanding dash cam usage. Do you want to sort of give the, Inez?
So the concern actually was, how do I say this? The dash cams, the way that they're currently utilized now, will not capture, for example, an infraction as the infraction occurs. The dash cam is activated when the police officers activate their overhead lights. And then the dash cam will obviously begin recording, and it'll actually record 30 seconds. It'll show footage from 30 seconds prior to the stop itself. However, if the actual stop does not occur within the 30 seconds of the stop, you're not going to capture that aspect of it. So that was one of the things that I found challenging when it came to doing investigations, because in the end, it comes out to the word of the police officer and the complainant. And minus any independent witness, it's difficult to corroborate. So that's one of the concerns. But there's also the issue or things that we should look at before we make any recommendations, would be, is it cost prohibitive to run the cameras at all times? What are the legal issues associated to running the cameras? And I know that we reached out to Pam regarding that issue in terms of right to privacy, and I don't know if Pam wants to address that at all.
Sure, I'm happy to. I did provide some feedback to Mr. Mendez and Ms. Gonzalez regarding whether or not there is a reasonable expectation of privacy that a citizen would have that would prevent the dash cams from being in a police vehicle from being engaged sort of at all times around the clock. The Supreme Court has weighed in on sort of the question of whether there's a reasonable expectation of privacy. Pretty much the foundational case was Katz, and I believe that was sometime in the 70s, and they basically said, no, what a person exposes to the public, they have no reasonable expectation of privacy in that, whether it's their behavior, what they're wearing, any identifiers. Just that is why, in a community, the police can put up poll cams, and banks can have the ATM and other cameras that look out into the community and pretty much observe whatever is happening in the public sphere at all times. The only real variations on the Katz decision has been just sort of trying to keep up with technology, this type of surveillance, GPS, other things, whether or not those create some impingement on that reasonable expectation of privacy. And basically, the court has been consistent on that issue, that a person does not have a reasonable expectation of privacy of things that they place in the public sphere and expose to the public at all times. Long and short of that is that there would be no legal prohibition for a police department to have continuously running dash cams in their vehicle. There may be other considerations, but that expectation of continuously running dash cams, looking at what the public is doing in the public sphere, is no violation of a reasonable expectation of privacy at this time. Again, there may be other considerations, but legally, that there is no prohibition.
I think one of the things we also have to consider is how the community itself feels about the police cars being equipped with that capacity. Again, it's something that I think we need to reach to the public for, whether it be in the form of a survey or something, to assess how they feel about it.
Yeah, and certainly even the rank and file police.
That's the other issue that we have to consider.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of research questions, and I think where we are now is kind of making a list of these research questions, like, is there a problem? Are there a lot of problematic stops? Is there any sort of data suggesting that? What do dash cams show now? Let's see what else.
Well, I think we do have to ask a lot of questions and make sure we partner with the chief to find out exactly how they're being utilized. And because one of the issues that I found in actually looking at dash cam footage for the investigations that I was doing is the positioning of the existing dash cams that they have. One of the issues is the dash cams capture the officers inside of the car, so we don't want to have to monitor the police officers 24/7. We certainly don't want to listen to their conversations 24/7. Again, I would be looking at it more that if we were going to implement, say, a pilot program or even research the possibility of, is that the cameras would have to be something that's positioned in such a way to only capture, say, for example, the violation that's occurring outside, but not capture audio until, of course, the lights are activated, at which time then you're going to want to, for obvious reasons, capture audio during the actual stop itself.
And are they currently capturing audio?
When the lights are activated, yes.
And how does this compare with the body cams that they're wearing?
Well, the body cams don't record 24/7 either. They have to be activated by the police officer. They tap them, right, and then they're activated.
So we're right at the beginning of this process. I would like to, request anyone who is interested to contact me or Inez as we sort of put together a plan for this, pilot study. What are we trying to accomplish? And over what time period, and so forth. Let's see what else. So I don't have anything else on this issue. Anybody have any questions? Okay.
So we are recommending a pilot study, or are we doing the pilot study and then giving our recommendation to CPD?
I think we're recommending a pilot study, and we have to do the research first and then recommend the pilot study. But we're going to have to come up with a question. What is, again, like the chairman said, what is it that we're trying to achieve?
Right.
What is the ultimate goal? In my case, it was, I guess what we're looking at is, would it make a difference in terms of the number of complaints that we get, or how we handle the complaints, or even how the CPD handles its complaints against personnel, if we had cameras that showed the violations beforehand? Because, for example, as one of the allegations that was made at our previous meeting was that individual motorists are being pulled over simply because they're people of color. And so I believe that a lot of those things could be put to rest if we had the infraction on video first, so there's no argument about what transpired. They were pulled over because they went through a light, or they made a right turn without stopping at a stop sign, that kind of thing. So, but again, is what we're trying to achieve worth the expense that may be incurred with trying to change what it is they currently have, and how would the people feel about what it is we're trying to do? Because again, we don't want to make the situation in the community worse, and certainly, how do the police feel about what it is we're trying to do? So however it is that it's done, we have to take all those factors in consideration. So I think the study should be done first, bring all these people to the table first, and then maybe making a recommendation on how we wish to proceed.
And couldn't the dashboard cams be activated by the police in the same way the body cameras are activated?
You know what, I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to actually either research it through Axon, who's currently, you have the answer, Mr. Dillard, I take it?
I think so. Those usually be when you engage your lights,
Correct.
it automatically comes on.
Right, I think what she was asking is much in the same way if the body cam is activated.
The body cam is not, because it's wireless and it's not running through the system, but it all depends on department procedures and policies, that I think the policies that you supposed to, as you engage out of that car, you're supposed to automatically push that button
That's correct.
as you approach that vehicle or approach that situation.
Yeah, and it's not the body cam footage that I have any problem with. As long as they activate it on the assignment, it is a violation of their policy not to. But yeah, so I don't know if you can activate the dash cam without having the overhead lights activated first. That I don't know.
I
But
mean,
yet
in
again-
today's technology, you would think
But even if they
surely
did, the
that could
point
be
is,
done.
can you activate it quick enough to catch the infraction that took place in front of the officers? So-
Yeah, I think an important question is there some kind of middle ground between
Right.
turning it on when the lights come on and having it run continuously? I mean, there might be some other way to do it, because if you have it running continuously,
You're talking
that's a
about,
tremendous amount of information,
Right.
even if you could store it.
you're about the storage issues and battery life issues.
So, yeah.
It all depends on that battery life and that.
Right,
and that-
so
Yes.
there's a lot of factors to consider before we make any recommendations. And again, we have to see what it is, what our ultimate goal is, and whether or not our ultimate goal is in line with whatever it is that the community is looking for us to achieve.
I think for me, I understand and I would love to be a part of that group. But I want us to also consider, for people of color, it would give an extra layer of safety if they knew that that was something that was activated right away, as opposed to when the lights came on. I'm now concerned that the body camera is only activated when someone touches, because I wonder, like, how many times does something happen before it's actually, even though George was making the statement that they're supposed to do it right away, that's a big concern for me. If, like, you know, you get reports or complaints, and then you look at it, and you could definitely tell that there's some missing piece to that. I wonder how often does that happen?
That might be something that we need to look at as well. I will say this to you, that of the 6 complaints, for example, that we got in the portal, there were 2 complaints in particular that actually brought this whole situation to light. That's the only reason why it even came up. Because again, it's the word of the officer versus what the complainant is suggesting. And there was no video footage of whatever it is transpired prior to that contact. So that's the reason why it even came up. But, yeah.
You gotta take into consideration too also, and you probably agree with me on this one. If you run up on a hot call and you get out, and you have to get out of your vehicle right away, hopefully if you got your lights on and they automatic, that camera kicks on, you don't have a chance to press this.
Yeah.
You have to do what you have to do and hope that camera's in there is catching footage of what's going on.
Yeah.
I will say, though, it's just like training like anything else, whether it's firearms training or any other training that the officers get. It almost becomes instinctive for them to do that. I will say also that in my interaction with the Office of Professional Standards, that they actually have had instances where an individual made a complaint, and I'm talking about the ones that I've actually had to review myself. They had a complaint, and it was the CPD that discovered that during that particular stop, the body cam was not actually engaged, and they then actually charged the officer. So even though they didn't sustain, so let's say, the initial complaint, they did actually have collateral complaint against the officer, where they found them guilty of failing to comply with the policy, which was to turn that body cam, to activate the body cam.
You know, we might find that there's already some studies out there, you know.
Well, that's why I said we're going to have to look at that. You know, I did reach out to a professor from John Jay to see what it is. Again, but his primary thing was, let's try to find out. We have to identify what are we trying to achieve, and come up with a research question, and he might actually be willing to do that for us.
Yep.
And the survey will be pretty.
Right. I think that's imperative to find out how the community feels about it and how the officers feel about it as well. It's important on both sides of the spectrum to get everybody's perspective. Thank you.
You know, Mr. Foley, you had a question. Can we deal with that in the public comment period?
I'll check into Monday.
Okay.
Related to the camera stuff. Thank y'all so much.
Okay.
Y'all have a great weekend. We got my-
Oh, yeah, well, we got one more, we got one more thing, which is something that we touched on briefly earlier, which is the public outreach opportunities. So you already have been invited to volunteer for the West Haven Community Day on August 5th. There's basically, it's one of those little apps, you click the button and then you can pick an hour or 2 hours. And if we get enough of us, we will have, we'll have good coverage, which I think would be a very useful thing to do. And we will also be providing a list of other festivals and events that we can attend. And similarly, looking for people to volunteer to cover. If there are events you want us to cover, and that would I would assume then that you would want to be there, let us know. And we can support you with merchandise and even a tent and a table and whatever it is you might need. One thing I should point out to you all, though, of course, is that, when you go grocery shopping or you go to the farmer's market or wherever, you don't have to wear this shirt. And if somebody asks you, what's that shirt? Well, it's a good way to increase visibility. It doesn't need to be a formal outreach. We can just represent. I think we need to build that kind of morale and that kind of spirit. So, any other questions on outreach at this point?
There's a back to school bash too. I don't know the exact date, but that's always be down here right behind us.
Okay.
Plenty of kids and.
That's the one where they give the backpacks away?
Yeah.
Backpacks and school supplies.
Okay. Okay, so we have now our second public comment period. Ms. Fraley?
Thank you. I wanted to wait until now because I wanted to hear about the body cam stuff, because this is sort of related. So I think you all heard about the article that said escalated police stops of black men are linguistically and psychologically distinct in their earliest moments. So in the first 45 seconds or the first 25 seconds or the first 45 words are predictive of how the stop will go. And that it's predictive of an arrest, handcuffing, and a search. So, and so we have body cameras. So if you do the research on, anyway, it's just an idea that if you're doing research on cameras, it would be good to look at the complaints, the detentions, the arrests, the handcuffing, and see what happened in the body camera before those things happen. So the idea is that the stop escalates according to the police officer's language. And I can send this to you. The other thing that's sort of connected is from the 2022 Charlottesville Police Department Annual Report. There are two things I didn't understand, and I think that these numbers are in some ways related to my question about body cameras and the research that it makes a difference what the police officer says and how whether a person's detained or arrested or handcuffed. And these are the 2022 investigative detentions / response to resistance. So I don't know what that means, response to resistance. Like the person they're trying to detain is resistant. So I haven't ever seen that in a policy or anyway. And then the things underneath were hands-on weapons displayed, weapons used. So I'm assuming it's the police officer showing their weapon. And so anyway, those are certainly escalated events. So
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I don't want to interrupt you, I just can't answer those questions. But Captain Haney could certainly answer those questions for you.
okay, yeah. And then the other one, and then there's a different picture, but I think they're related. That somehow I would recommend that you all study body camera footage to see if there is a relationship here in our town with the escalation, the verbiage used by the police and the escalation of the stop.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone online, Mr. Trail?
No hands raised at this time.
Anyone else here want to ask a question, make a comment? All right, any other comments for the good of the group? Here, come, please.
So, Susan Perry, hi. So the question would be, we have had data that more people of color are pulled over. In terms of the dash cam, it did make sense if it's earlier than this, then you could see what's going on. I want to know what other methods there are to account for or to follow how many stops are made by folks for the police and how many of them are, if it's not this way, how else would you count it? Do you know what I'm saying? How would you count and have accountability for people being stopped because of, what they look like?
Yeah, and one of the things that through 2022, the CPD was tabulating various kinds of encounters. Recently, they haven't been tabulating those kinds of encounters, or at least publishing the reports. And that's something that we want to pursue as well.
Okay, great.
And just for your information, there is an interesting way that people have looked at racial differences in car stops. It is to look at the distribution of car stops by race at different times of day. At night, when the police officer can't see very well what the race of the person is, if that's different from the situation in the day when the police officer can easily see the race of the person. But that takes a lot of stops to make that study. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I'll make a motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Ms. Washington?
Yeah.
Reverend Jones Turner?
Yes.
And Mr. Dillard?
Yes.
And Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
And Susan
Yes.
Krischel? Okay, it's unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.